off to work here in about 15 minutes, so this is going to be completely impromptu. It's not rehearsed, and it's not even well thought out, probably. But my father just called me, and he's not saved. Okay, he has some very different beliefs, but he's miserable in his life. He's not happy with the way his life turned out. He's bitter against the concept of God. He doesn't believe in. He believes in there's got to be something out there. Okay, but whenever I talk to him about God, it's, well, if there was God, son, then my life wouldn't be like this. If there was a God, son, there'd be no suffering, there'd be no sickness, there'd be no disease, there'd be no. He'd manifest himself. I don't see him anywhere. I don't see any evidence of him. All I know is my life stinks, and if God really exists, then he don't care two tinkers, what, about me. And that really struck me. I felt for him. He's my father. I love him. So I tried to explain to him, Dad, we're living in an imperfect world. We're living in a world that's fallen, in a world that's definitely imperfect because man has chose that. And that wasn't getting through to him. I tried to explain it to him. And in the process, I hung up the phone after we had a conversation, and it really got me thinking that I come across this process as not biblical. I'm not establishing this as doctrine. These are just my own thoughts, and I wanted to share them with you and bounce them off you and see what you think. But I really got to thinking that if God knows everything from the beginning to the end, then he must have seen the fall of man. He must know how we turned out, and eventually the end. But there's a verse that says that God saw man, and we were doing these evil things, such evil that he never even imagined. And it kind of shocked me, because our concept of God is God knows absolutely everything. Okay, God knows the beginning from the end. He knows every choice we'll make. He knows every hair on our head, and that's biblical. But it's also biblical that we can do things that actually surprise God, that God's never even imagined, that God never even had the concept of. And I believe he was talking in this scripture about sexual sin, sex with animals, and men laying with men. But if we can surprise God, it got me thinking about free will. God gives us free will. And one of my dad's problems was, if God was God, then he would have fixed my life. And I said, well, for God to have fixed your life, he'd have to alter every bad decision you ever made. He'd have to alter the decisions of total strangers to get them to make the right decisions that affect you in a positive manner. He'd have to affect the weather. He'd have to affect every aspect of the world. He'd have to be completely micromanaging your world and everybody else's, the other 6 billion people and the billions that came before us and the people that come after. And if he was to micromanage our lives that way, we would be robots. We don't make our own choices. Everything's altered for us. Our paths are cleared and guided to a certain destination, where we get to this destination, make choices based on what God makes us do instead of what we choose to do. So if we can surprise God, okay, and we have free will, we're not controlled like that, like robots. I can see in one man's life, every choice he makes, we make a choice several choices every single minute, whether I should have lit this cigarette after I've had people make comments on it, whether to grab this Mountain Dew that's sitting down here and take a swig off of it. And there are choices, one after the other, every minute of our life, every day of our life, every month, every year, and they all affect the direction of our life. So I know in God's infinite wisdom, he's so far above us that he sees every single choice that we'll ever make, and it's like a branching system. Okay, he can grab that Coke, or he cannot. There's two branches. He can go to the store right now, he can choose to go to work, or stay here and make videos all night and lose his job. You see what I'm saying? There's these myriad of branches of choices, and thousands upon thousands, millions upon millions during our lifetime. And I think in God, in his infinite wisdom, if you can follow me here, there's these branches that look like, just millions of them shooting off for all our choices. And he can ascertain through his wisdom, knowing who we are. He created us. He's watched us every day of our life. has a plan for our life. He's numbered the hairs on our head. He knows us very, very well, better than we know ourselves. So he says, I think Jerry's going to end up right here. But now, if I can surprise God, then I could obviously make a decision that God had never imagined and end up over here. Okay? Anyhow, that's free will. So then I started thinking, well, if God knows that this world was going to be fallen, then what was the purpose of creating it in the first place? So I started looking into the lives of the apostles, the prophets of God, the people of God from the beginning to the end, and tried to see what their outtake of free will was and the meaning of life. And what I got from it was this, that every single man of God had only two real objectives. That was to love God with all their heart, soul, and mind. God was the entire focus of their life. His ways, His will, that was their objective, to do the will of God, to do the things He wanted them to do, to follow His laws, to walk in the ways of His wisdom, and try to lead their lives as He'd want them to lead their lives. In other words, they want to follow the branches of all these choices as closely as they can in God's will to get exactly to where God thought that they should be and where He intended us to be. But we can shoot off on these other branches and get away from God. If God saw that this world was going to be fallen, and the prophets of God, and the people of God, and the apostles of God, that they sought to get to His direction, what was the objective? And the objective, the second thing that all these men of God did, and pursued with all their life, was to get to the other side. So you see, their life wasn't really about here and now and me. It was about there, the other side, and then what's going to happen then, and everybody else, and God's ways, helping my brother, following God's laws. So in a way, you could almost think of this life as a purification process, as a boot camp, in a way. We're down here to suffer. God knew this was going to be a fallen world. He knew it would be depraved and full of sickness and suffering and death and horrible things, not because of God, but because of the choices that men make in their objective free will, and because that we are the stewards of this planet. So the way the planet looks and the way the people on it act, they're the result of man being in control and ultimately following Satan rather than God. If men followed God, there'd be no murder, but they don't. They follow Satan, so there is murder. If men follow God, there'd be no divorce. There'd be perfect marriages, which means there'd be children that grow up in righteousness, and there'd be no pornography, and there'd be no drunkenness, and heroin addicts, and gambling, and lust, and all these things that make this planet a horrible place to live. If we followed the will of God, we'd live in a perfect place. But because mankind is inherently evil in his thoughts, following after Satan, God is looking for a pure people. A pure and holy people that love God with all their heart, soul, and mind, without Him having to manifest Himself. Okay? Because if God were to manifest Himself, this huge, powerful, incredibly intelligent and powerful being, men would follow God out of pure fear. There's no debate whether He exists or not. He's right there, He's big, He's powerful. And the majority of people would do exactly what He said out of fear and not wanting to be wiped out. So we live a life by faith. We choose to accept God. Even though we can't see Him, touch Him, smell Him, there is no empirical scientific evidence for God per se. We choose as Christians in our life to follow a holy God because we believe in who He is. We believe in what He believes in His ways, and we believe in love and peace and helping our neighbor and certain things. We also believe that certain things are evil, and that makes the world mad. We love God purely not because He shows Himself and He threatens us, but because we believe in our heart and who He is.